joining me today. I'm going to be talking about 60 years of the women of Star Trek. Now, my name is Jessie. I host Crusher Combo Podcast, where I deep dive Star Trek through the eyes of Dr. Beverly Crusher. And the one thing that you have to know about me is I did not grow up with Star Trek. I grew up with Star Wars, Alien, all Harrison Ford movies, everything you could think of, but not Trek. My husband, who's currently trying to find parking at the moment, so he's a little late, is a Trekkie, and he wanted to get me to watch Next Generation. 18 years later, he finally, we good? Sound good? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear up a little bit.
Okay, sounds good. So 18 years later, he finally got me into TNG, and I dived in so deep that I binged it in 2.5 weeks. So, and it's all the redhead's fault. Okay, so Dr. Beverly Crusher, I felt represented because I was a single mom for a very long time before I married my husband. I had a career, and that was very rare to see in a 80s, 90s television show. Okay, to see a single mom doing what she could to protect, provide for her kid and also take care of herself. And as I continued to watch Trek, I noticed there was a lot of amazing women that represented so many different people, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So, before I get started on the shows, however, can anyone tell me one particular woman who helped Gene's vision get off the ground? Lucille Ball, exactly. Not many people know that, and actually, I was one of them. This panel is also based off of the Non-Visitors book, Open a Channel, okay? Absolutely recommend it. She really did like over a year of interviews and studied, watched episodes, all this stuff. And this is actually what she said in her book. She mentions, Star Trek owes its existence to one of the most famous women in television history, Lucille Ball. Without her backing, the show would never have gotten off the ground. She was responsible for a lot of firsts in Hollywood, and yet, as her daughter Lucy Arnaz said in the documentary Lucy and Desi, she didn't care about being the first woman of anything. She just wanted to be an equal and show that she could do it. And she, if anyone has seen any documentaries, very tight budget for Gene, and it wasn't enough money that she forked the money out of her own pocket to produce the show. So if it wasn't for Lucille Ball, we really wouldn't have Trek today, okay? So definitely wanted to highlight that. But let's start with the OG, the pillars of the women who started it all from the original series. In 1966, Star Trek, the original series, broke new ground in science fiction by addressing topics that were considered taboo at the time. Its portrayal of women in prominent roles was especially progressive, even if the series sometimes reflected limitations and flaws of its area. Was Star Trek perfect? No. Especially for the women characters. However, like I said earlier, representation meant a lot, particularly with Nichelle Nichols. That was a huge, groundbreaking moment. I mean, even Whoopi Goldberg, huge fan. The whole reason why she wanted to be on TNG was because of Nichelle. And of course, we have Majel Barrett, who not only played Nurse Chapel, but she was also in the pilot, supposed to be number 1. We're not going to get into why that didn't happen. But she's still in the series, and of course, she is the mother of Trek, as she was married to Gene. And then we have Grace Lee Whitney. If anyone has read her book, please do so. There is a lot that she had gone through, and it was very sad to know the limitations, all the struggles that they get, but again, it was the 60s. Like, there was just not a lot for the women to do as much as they wanted to, and as much as Gene kind of tried to push the boundaries, business is business, right? So there was just definitely issues when it came to that. But we had seen so many different women come and go throughout the series, but as I said, there was definitely flaws due to the era of the show. Now, when they decided to bring Trek back after all these years, and of course this was about 21 years later, Gene had a different vision when it came to the women, And then that was The Next Generation. In 1987, Star Trek The Next Generation revived Star Trek with a new crew and a fresh perspective. The show's evolving dynamic honored what Star Trek had always been while continuing its vision of a better future. Its female characters offered a noticeable contrast to earlier portrayals, showing meaningful progress even if the representation was still not perfect. Again, it's the 80s and the 90s. There was still issues at that time, but we had our first chief medical officer was a woman. She was a single mom. She was holding down a whole department. She was able to tell the doctor, that's an order, you have to listen to me, or not the doctor, the captain. And that was a huge step. Now, was Beverly's story perfect? No. Which I talk a lot about in my podcast. But the same with Deanna Troi, okay? I think it was a really cool thing to have a counselor, and I think Picard was a good character to embrace that. However, they did tend to take Deanna's role in a different direction that wasn't great. And of course, we didn't get Tasha for very long. Okay, died first season. She could have had huge potential, but as always, there's always a misogynistic sideways that happens, and they wanted to make Worf the front of the line, right? So now, story-wise, having a Klingon on the ship, that's huge, because that was the big deal back then. But to remove Tasha from that probably wasn't the best move. But then again, we did have other women. We had Ensign Ro. We had, like I said, Guinan, Whoopi Goldberg. We did have Diana Muldaur, who was on the original series and came back as Pulaski. I am not a Pulaski hater. I'm okay. I'm okay with Pulaski. It's totally fine. I think Beverly and her would have been friends. Okay. But unfortunately, her character just wasn't fit right for the vision that they had for TNG, right? So I think that was kind of an issue. And of course, all behind the scenes has some drama. And as everyone knows, she was let go in season 2. But thanks to the fans and a specific person, a showrunner, was no longer there, she was able to come back. So again, it wasn't perfect, but they represented so much that it got people to watch Trek, especially in my generation, okay? Like my husband. He's a millennial, he watched TNG, he didn't care for TOS, but this is what got him into Trek. But they weren't the only ones, because the 90s was a huge era for Trek. And that's when we had Deep Space Nine. In 1993, as Star Trek The Next Generation was concluding its journey, Star Trek Deep Space Nine introduced a bold new vision of Star Trek. The betrayal of the franchise's first black captain was groundbreaking, made even more significant by the presence of 2 women serving as his first and second officers. The series presented its female characters with a depth and complexity that expanded far beyond what Star Trek has shown before. And as we have here, we have a nice Kira cosplayer over here, all right? I fell in love with Jadzia. I don't know about you guys, right? Jadzia, awesome. Like, I haven't had the chance to meet Terry Farrell yet, but if I do, I'm like, I'll probably like, oh my gosh. What I loved about her character was the relationship she had with the captain. Kind of like what we saw on TNG. I think Picard had a wonderful relationship with Troi. Okay, he confided in her. It didn't matter if she was a woman or anything like that. She was a counselor. She was doing her job. That friendship that they had, due to her being Curzon prior to that stuff, and continuing him calling her old man, it was a wonderful relationship. Okay. Now, did Jadzia's story end well? No. Unfortunately not. But we did see massive improvement with a lot of the Kiras, like Kira. Season 1, she just was angry all the time, went through a lot of stuff. Like, granted, she had every right to be angry. But as time went on, you saw her, to me, next to Nog, in my opinion, her character is probably one of the most transition characters there, right? Like, she went through a lot, and the growth was very noticeable. Even with Lita, right, where she Lena was such a great character. Chase is such an awesome person. But even that relationship with, oh, now I'm forgetting Nog's father's name. Rom, thank you, Rom. This is why you guys are here. You're helping me out. With Rom, that was such a special relationship too, because as much as Rom was kind of shown as the stupid brother, I guess you want to call it, he actually knew more than Quark did. And she was always there to be by his side and be like, no, you know what you're doing, go with your gut. And that relationship was really, really great. But of course they didn't stop there. Like I said, the 90s was the best when it came to showcasing women characters. Voyager happened, and with its 4th live action series, Star Trek Voyager took the franchise in a bold new direction by introducing Star Trek's first female captain that we see in a series. We're not going to forget about Garrett. People always are, they're like, well, what about Rachel Garrett? Yes, she was there, but we only saw her for a couple seconds, and that didn't end well either. But to have Janeway as the first captain, returning the story to deep space, the series shifted the focus from exploration to survival. As the crew struggled to find their way home, it also features the franchise's first female chief engineer, B'Elanna Torres, and introduced Seven of Nine, whose powerful character arc would remain one of Star Trek's most endearing stories for decades to come. And just where she came from, the fact that she was former Borg, then becoming the captain of the Enterprise, like that's huge, all right? But as everyone knows, Janeway was also a huge inspiration for little girls who were watching this in the 90s, seeing a female lead a ship, all these male officers just being, you know, yes sir, this is, and they followed her. They were trapped in the Delta Quadrant, guys. Like, this was something that no one had gone through before, and she led them home. And that was a huge deal for a lot of, not only just little girls, but teenage girls, even young women who saw that, who started going into STEM because of Beverly, because of Troy, because of Janeway. We've seen astronauts, right? That they're like, I want to go into space because I saw Janeway into space. That's the beauty of Star Trek. And that's one of the brilliant things that I fell in love with Trek, was because of the message it brings. It brings a message of hope. It brings a message of a better future. And we have so many amazing women leading the path. And I think Voyager really showcased that the best, in my opinion, when it came to the 90s series. So, concluding into that, we got Enterprise. I just finished Enterprise, guys. I'm still going through it. 965 plus episodes is a lot to get to, but I'm doing my best. In its final installment of the Berman era, Star Trek Enterprise returned to the beginning of Starfleet history. Set long before the days of James T. Kirk and Spock, while the series did not always showcase its women as strongly as some earlier Star Trek shows, characters like T'Pol and Hoshi Sato stood out as pioneers in their own right, adding new depth to the legacy of female characters across the franchise. So, I don't know if you guys remember Strange New Worlds. They did that crossover with Lower Decks. Of course, Boimler is like freaking out that, oh my gosh, I'm with Pike and the crew. But then we got to see like Ortegas or Uhura being like Hoshi Sato, right? Like, they started it all. Unfortunately, as you can see, there's only 2 women here. I think they tried to go back and just kind of see like it grew over the last like 3 centuries, but they did start a revolution of their own. Even though they were the last show, they kind of had to go backwards, right? Just Hoshi alone, being the first really communications officer, she started from scratch. She's the one that created the whole dialect and everything like that. That would go to Uhura 200, 300 years later, right? And then T'Pol was also Vulcan. She was the one that started the fact of where Spock would be a part of that, right? So they started, even though we got it backwards, they started in their own right. And that's why a lot of people, First Flight Podcast, definitely check them out. Chris and Abby love Enterprise. They deep dive it, they break it down. You'll definitely hear amazing stories when it comes to that. Now, of course, After Nemesis and Enterprise ended, Nemesis, again, not the greatest to end for TNG, but it is what it is. 12 years later, we do get Star Trek Discovery. Now, this was a hit and miss. New era, new showrunner, new person holding the fort, and it was with open arms. People were like, yay, Star Trek, but yes, there was some up and down of people not sure if it was the right fit or whatever, but I still think, as I'm starting my Discovery era, they did showcase some amazing female characters. One person I forgot to put up here was Tig Notaro, who plays Jet Reno. She's hilarious, and I was so upset that no offense to the president, but I fell in love with Jet. But 12 years later, the franchise rose from the ashes with Star Trek Discovery, featuring Star Trek's first black female captain, and a protagonist shaped by a deeply complicated past. The series revised the franchise ideals of IDIC while reaffirming its enduring belief in the better future. The women of Discovery were vibrant, complex, and awfully deeply inspiring, bringing a renewed sense of strength and perspective to the franchise. The one thing that I had heard before getting into Discovery is that a lot of people didn't like Michael Burnham. They were just saying she was too emotional for being a captain, she shouldn't have done this or that. I've only seen the first couple episodes. I think that was the point. She grew up with the Vulcans guys who are supposed to be emotionless, and though the fact that she was fully human, she struggled with it a lot more than Spock did because he was only half human. So I think that was the point, and I think some fans might have missed that a little bit, but I could see her struggle and just going up and down the way she did because that's how she grew up. And she had to find her own way in the whole series of just who she was, not being Sarek's, foster child, not, losing her captain with Giorgio, all that stuff, right? So again, I think that was the point. I haven't seen the full series, so I can't say if they really hit the mark here and there, but I think that's what makes her inspiring because you see the journey that she goes on, and you see that in the end, she finds out who she is. She finds out, who am I? Same with Tilly, okay? Haven't seen Tilly, but I saw her in Academy, and I freaking loved her. So I'm excited about her journey, and the same with T'Rina. Also, again, Jet Reno. There are so many different female characters in this series that I'm like, I could see so many different representations for people now. My daughter is 17, she'll be 18. There's a lot of at her age that are watching these shows and feeling like, that's me, right? So that is what I think that Discovery, which is a perfect title, it's not just the ship, but they're discovering themselves. And that's what I loved about it from what I've seen so far, but I'm excited to see the rest of it. Now, Star Trek Picard, with the return of Jean-Luc Picard in Star Trek Picard, Star Trek revisited the world first established in Star Trek The Next Generation through a darker and more reflective lens. Alongside this evolution came a new generation of powerful female characters, each carrying a complicated past and deeply personal struggles. The series explored not only discovery later in life, but also the enduring idea that the hope remains essential to survival. A lot of hit and misses when it comes to Picard, because each season seems like its own different series, in my opinion. I did enjoy season 1, not a fan of 2, but obviously we'll talk about 3 here in a second. But the one character that I could say that really stood out for me in Picard was Raffi. She was also kind of like a Beverly character, put Picard in his place, was like, no, we're not doing that because Picard has his own way of dealing with things and I've always typically ended up wrong. But she went through a lot in that series. And at the end, again, you see her growth. You see her own discovery in life with Seven, though we didn't see it, I wish we did. But apparently behind the scenes with Seven, and then just figuring out who she was as a person. And I think all these characters did that. Did they do Agnes dirty? Yes. I didn't feel like that was the best ending for her, but when it came to season 3, I think she might have had, maybe she probably would have had a decent role, especially with Beverly. I think they would have gone along just fine, but they did want to wrap up that story in a different way. Same with Soji. I think it would have been really nice to have Soji in season 3 just because we already have the next generation with Crusher and Picard's son, and then also the LaForge girls. So Data's daughter, hello, that would have been nice to have. But I still think that they really showcased the best that they could with what we were given. Now, one of the issues that we had, short seasons. 10-episode seasons really don't get to show a lot of character growth. They do the best they can, and yes, in 26 episodes, there's filler episodes. They're throwing in something of like a bottle episode, or just like whatever they're happening over here. You don't really get to see that with a lot of these characters, which is why I think they kind of missed the mark in some things, but that still doesn't diminish what the characters represented. Particularly Raffi, because since she was there the whole 3 seasons, it worked out for her. And also Michelle Hurd is amazing, and I absolutely adore her. They decided to go back to the animated with probably 2 of the best, in my opinion, Star Trek shows out there. So we start with Lower Decks. Returning to animation with a sharp sense of humor, Star Trek Lower Decks embraced the sillier side of Star Trek while still holding onto the heart, optimism, and hope that defined the franchise. Inspired by a memorable Star Trek The Next Generation episode, the series followed female characters who experience remarkable personal growth, resilience, and independence through their journeys. Does anyone know what TNG episode this series is based off of? Nope, no hands, okay. It was actually Lower Decks. Which was also loosely off of First Duty. So if you guys remember, Wesley was at the academy, there was an accident, they tried to lie about it, there was Nicholas Locarno, aka Tom Paris, and we had Ensign Sito, she was a cadet at the time, she was part of that team. She ends up going on the Enterprise, and she ends up dying at the end while trying to help a Cardassian. That was Mike McMahon's favorite episode, and he solely based his series off of that one episode. Which, come to find out, that Mariner was friends with Sito, and that was her whole journey from episode 1 of season 1 to the end of season 5, of her kind of just letting go of that pain that she had of Sito and find out who she was. So that was her journey, and the same with her mother relationship with Carol Freeman, even Tendi having to showcase that the Orions were more than just pirates. They were also scientists. She was also trying to showcase that her family was different versus everybody else, which they also mentioned in Strange New Worlds. And that was what, and also, who doesn't love a cat doctor, right? Like Tiana, like I was super stoked, right? Tiana was also a favorite of mine. And little fun fact, the jacket was an homage to Beverly. Okay, so, and obviously, because this is based off a TNG episode, but yeah, these characters, even though they're animated, they still follow the same history of strong, powerful women, especially Mariner, because when you first see her, you're just like, oh man, she's like a brat, she's causing all these problems. No, she was going through, still hurting from the loss of her friend. She didn't know how to handle it until she had her friends with her to guide her through. Particularly Borna, which, you know, he was a fun character to have. And then we got Prodigy. So continuing Star Trek's journey into animation, Star Trek Prodigy was created with younger audiences in mind, following a group of young adventurers inspired by the dream of a better future. Yet its thoughtful storytelling and emotional depth quickly proved it to be one of the franchise's standout series by honoring Star Trek legacy through characters like Catherine Janeway in a hologram form, and by giving each character a meaningful personal journey. Prodigy carried forward the same spirit of hope, resilience, and optimism that has defined Star Trek for generations. And again, these were kids, right? Going through their own journey, trying to figure out who they were. Now, Gwen obviously had to save her people, so that, you know, a lot on her shoulders. But one thing that I did, of course, obviously love in season 2 is that they brought back Wesley Crusher, and gave him a story that I think was absolutely important for his character. And I think was absolutely important for Will to be able to do what he felt was right within the character. And he worked so well with the kids, and he worked so well with Gwen, Janeway, bringing back Chakotay, like doing all this stuff. It was history, but it was part of the story, and it made sense. I love Prodigy. If you guys have not seen it, unfortunately it's not on any streaming platform, but definitely check it out because it is brilliant. But Strange New Worlds, returning to the earlier voyages of the Enterprise under Christopher Pike, Strange New Worlds revisits Star Trek roots while adding a modern twist. The series is anchored by a memorable ensemble of female characters who embody the very best qualities of the franchise, while also expanding familiar faces with fresh depth and new storytelling possibilities. We got Una, who was originally number 1, which was, of course, the pilot that Majel Barrett was supposed to play. I love that they brought this character back because a lot of people, from what I was hearing from fans, they were like, we really liked number 1, but we didn't get to see much of her, right? We didn't get to know much of her. So they brought her back with Una Chin Riley. Then, of course, we have La'an Noonien Singh, who she's supposed to be a descendant to Khan. And then my personal favorite, Erica Ortegas, who definitely shows that you can have fun as a pilot and still, teach the captain a few new things, which I think is hilarious. Strange New Worlds really took Star Trek into a different direction. I think, there was kind of some up and downs with the modern series, particularly Discovery and Picard. But Strange New Worlds, everyone was like, yes, especially having Uhura back and Chapel, seeing where they came from prior to what we saw in TOS. I think that was a brilliant way of just kind of enhancing their characters, because if you go back now to the original series, you're now going to see Chapel and Uhura in kind of a different light because you know where they came from. And of course the actors did a brilliant job of embodying those characters as much as they can. So absolutely love Strange New Worlds. Very, very sad it's going to be ending. And of course we have Starfleet Academy. Now, Starfleet Academy did not, in my opinion, did not get its due. I think there was a lot of people just not sure if it was going to work out. But in my opinion, I think it really honored the history again, but showcasing new characters through it. And so with this, I put the most recent series of Starfleet Academy moves the franchise far into the future to explore a new beginning. It focuses on a new generation of cadets rebuilding hope and purpose after enduring hardship, unlike anything previously seen in Star Trek. Through its female characters in particular, the series reinforces the idea that it's never too late to learn, grow, redefine yourself, no matter what you've been through. Obviously, I'm only able to show 3 here, but we had Laura Thok, who's supposed to be half Jem'Hadar and half Klingon, which that was a whole thing, but that just shows like they progressed. Like something happened for her to be able to be part of the Starfleet Academy, right, and part of the Federation. We also had Tarima, who was Betazoid but also had a special ability, showed her journey going through that. We got Jet Reno back, so I think in this case they were headed into the right direction, but unfortunately we're not going to see more past season 2. So hopefully whatever we're going to get, it's just going to continue what I feel like they already started, right? Especially what before them. They're in the 32nd century, so they're already 800-900 years ahead from what we saw with Beverly and Janeway and all them. But we still see a little bit in like Nala. She's almost 500 years old, guys, so she's seen a lot, okay? She has every right to have some moments, all right? But I love their memory wall that they had, and I'm all, as Beverly fan, I'm like, where's Beverly? There she is. Okay, perfect, all right. But it was just so great to just see the people before them, and because they were rebuilding the Federation, that was a good way of being like, okay, we're gonna honor these people by doing this, right? And that's what I think, that's what I loved about Starfleet Academy. Now, we did get some fan favorite backs, like I said. We got Chapel and Uhura, and of course we got Beverly Crusher, Deanna Troi, and 7 and 9 and Picard. I think just in this right here, and I've already talked about Chapel and Uhura, how their characters have now been enhanced in their stories. But particularly the women on the top, I feel like that they got their justice. Okay, there was a lot of stories, guys. I'm not even going to talk about Sub Rosa, but there was a lot of stories that there was not great for our women. But Picard showed who they really were. The first 5 minutes of season 3 was Beverly with a rifle, just shooting and firing, trying to protect her kid and getting shot and all this stuff. I'm like, see, she was she was a baddie. See, I knew she could do it. And we finally got to see that. And it was great because everyone loved Beverly and they weren't sure why she wasn't even mentioned in the first couple of seasons. But again, we got to just see a lot of growth with these characters, particularly 7 of 9. Like I said, she went through so much, even after the Delta Quadrant. She tried to find her footing, didn't know where she belonged. She even said in season 3, she's just trying to find her family. That feeling that she felt of home on Voyager, and she ended up finding it really with this cast of everyone on Picard. So I think, again, it's showing, even though these characters already had a history, they're still learning, they're still growing, and there's still stuff that we can learn from when it comes to these characters. Now, I did have a couple of listeners on from my social media, and I just asked them about certain characters. And Katie on Thread said, for sure 7 of 9, Voyager, her coming of age story was very relevant to me when I watched the show for the first time, and in a way was therapeutic to have a character like that to look up to Captain Janeway too, as she reminded me so much of my mother. In fact, for my birthday, my mother gave me a card that had this on it. I guess you could say that those characters were very impactful for our lives. And then Jody from Clone Star Podcast said that her answer will always be 7, since she has already mentioned, she wanted us to mention Raffi. In her less than 30 episodes, we are given a complex, intelligent woman who is flawed, but is always evolving. The impact and importance of Raffi isn't really given enough attention. Then we got a couple more. Nicholas on Thread said, Kira. Her strength, her ability to grow, her fierceness, her self-awareness, and her understanding and acceptance of her flaws, her loyalty and her protectiveness, and her clear-sighted judgment of people by their actions. And then Lottie, who is actually an illustrator, she says Tilly, because until I saw her on screen, I had never seen someone remotely plus size in a Starfleet uniform. As a child, I always imagined shrinking myself to be Starfleet. As an adult, she showed me that there was a place for someone with a body of a bit like mine in the imagined world. So again, representation matters, right? Now I'm just going to do real quick. I've already mentioned a little bit of why I love Beverly Crusher. But one of the things is too, besides where I felt represented, I also feel like Beverly really showcases the best qualities of Trek. Okay? That hope, that kindness, that compassion. She is always fighting for her patients. She's always fighting for her crew. She is a battle-hardened mother, all right? Which is the posters that I have. Battle-hardened mother with that rifle right in her hand. She represents so many different people, and so many fans that I've talked to said she represented the mother they didn't have growing up. You know, there were certain people who didn't have a mom or whatever, and they would look at TNG and they would see Beverly, and that was just, you know, I wish I had a mom like that. And that's the best part of Trek, okay? And it's moments like that where, like, I'm late to the party, guys. Like, I'm 30 years late to the party, but I see it. And I love hearing your guys' stories, because there's a reason why you still hang on to Star Trek to this day. There's still reasons why you love it. Again, there's flaws in all the series, and there's flaws in all the characters, but there is a point where it's like, it is so special to us for a reason. And that, for me, is why I love Beverly Crusher. So, does anyone have questions or comments or anything like that about their favorite female character? I see a little emotion over here. No, that's great. I mean, I'm at least hitting something, right? Like,
Always makes me emotional. I was one of those little girls in the 90s staying up till at 10 p.m. watching Captain Janeway sing with everybody.
Right.
And, but it all
Tilly.
Not only did I get that love nice representation, but I got that really intense neurotype content
Right.
representation.
Yes.
Like, you cannot tell me that girl is not ADHD. You cannot tell me. So seeing that was like the first time I really saw myself. Like,
Okay.
being women and seeing that over Star Trek my whole life. Like, this franchise has saved my life more times than I can tell you.
And you know what? You're not the first person that said that to me. And I don't know if my reporting is catching this, but she's saying that Tilly was the first time she felt represented as an adult, okay? And that Star Trek has saved her life. I've heard that so many times with so many people that if it wasn't for Star Trek, they wouldn't be here today. And it's just because of all the characters. And it's not just the female characters, right? It's the male characters. It's Data, right? Like even people who are autistic saying that they feel represented by Data alone. Now, Data was also going through his own journey, and my husband finally made it, by the way, with, with the parking. Data's his favorite character, all right? We don't talk about Nemesis. He still is angry to this day, but luckily Data came back. Right, yes. But those are those moments, like he was so upset that Data died, and that was because he loved the character so much. And that's what's so great about it. Does anyone have anything? Right over here. Let me come to you. So.
So when I was in elementary school, I would get home at 3:15 and watch the last 45 minutes of the original series every day. So that's what I actually grew up on. And then Next Generation came out when I was in junior high, and I watched every episode. Data is my favorite. My favorite female character is Tasha, and then we lost her because she was the first woman in Star Trek that I'm like, I want to be that. I don't necessarily identify with her. I actually identify more with Data, but Tasha is like, she's so cool. Yeah, but her and Data had a special relationship, and I was like so sad that that ended so quickly because they had a lot that they could have like fleshed out. They I do think they did a real disservice to the next generation by getting rid of Tasha so soon, and that could have been a completely different story. So she was so cool. She was badass.
Got one? Just wanted to say real fast that with Tasha, like I said, we lost her so soon. However, we did get a little snippet when it came to yesterday's Enterprise, right? So, or even when her sister showed up and Data was having those moments of like, I don't know how to feel about this because I see Tasha in you, but you're not Tasha, right? He was going through that growth. I think the Sela story would have been great. 2 episodes wasn't enough. I don't think they really fleshed that out enough. But fun fact, that was Denise's idea to bring in Sela, but it wasn't going to be Romulan. It was supposed to be that Helmsman was supposed to be the father. And then they decided to change it. But again, they didn't really give Tasha the service that she deserved, which Denise saw, and she was like, I'm out.
It was like, but tragic. You were like, what?
Yeah. I mean, and the way she died wasn't great, which is why they changed it in yesterday's Enterprise, right? Okay. That was in season 3. Yeah. And she even says that. She's all like, I died a meaningless death. I need to have some purpose. Yeah.
So I have watched Star Trek my whole life. I used to watch with my dad. But I think the first time I really identified with the character was Jemsy and Dax. Because growing up, women were taught to be very soft. And I was always very tomboyish and wanted to fight, fight the boys, right? And what I really liked about her is that she was a woman, but she was also strong. You could be a woman and strong. And what I really liked too is that Bashir really liked her because she was beautiful, but Worf really liked her because she was strong. And I loved their relationship. And I was like devastated when she died.
So another fun fact, as I told you earlier, my husband, TNG fan, didn't see the other series until I started seeing it. Now, DS9 is a favorite of yours, right? So, to kind of circle back to Jadzia, I say she's a Klingon. Like, I've always, like, I'm not a Klingon fan, but, like, I love Martok, and I love a couple of people, but I'm like, no, Jadzia is a Klingon, and that's it, right? She's on the list. You guys can fight me. That sounds good to me. Okay. Is there any other comments? We're good? But you have a comment, sir? Hold on. I got my husband over here. You got some? Oh. Beautiful question. How would Star Trek have affected me if I started as a kid versus an adult? Well, I can tell you right now, the show that absolutely affected me as a child was Xena. I was obsessed with Xena, guys, like powerful women, kicking butt, all that stuff. But I'm not sure because as a kid, you're kind of still learning and stuff like that. I wouldn't have been felt represented by Beverly, obviously, because I wasn't a single mom at that time. But I think I would have, again, seen those different representations of women of just being strong, just like Xena did. So I think I kind of would have probably felt the same path. This is why he's my husband, guys. He understands exactly how it goes. We're sci-fi people, right? So this is how it is. But yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. And I just thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much for talking about these wonderful women. As I was saying, this is off of Nana Visitor's book, Open a Channel, and it's just an amazing job that she did. And I'll do one little quick as I'm finishing off. Oh, there it is. He brought the book. Major Mel O'Malley. She is a Chapman in the Army. She's a fan. She's a Bev head, as we call ourselves. All right. She went and met Nana. Nana was so inspired by her. My friend is in that book. And she was surprised. She was like, I'm just a fan. But the story that she had was so inspirational to Nana that one thing that popped in my head was women supporting women, right? Which we don't really see as much, I don't think, in a lot of cases, but like in our current Trek, we've been seeing it, which is great. But Nana was so inspired by that she was like, I'm gonna have you in my book. Now my friend did not tell me this, so when I opened the book, I'm like freaking out, texting her, and she's like, surprise! But it was just so awesome to see, because she's just a fan, but she's explaining to her why Star Trek means to her, and that was the whole purpose of this book. And when you're going through it, like they went through so much in TOS, TNG, all that, but when you hear the stories of the actresses now, way different contrast, right? And I feel like the women paved the way for the actors now to be able to speak up, to say something, like, hey, can we do this with our character? And we have better representation of men to be like, sure, you know, versus, no, we're going to fire you.
We also have a lot more women fighting to keep Star Trek running. Like
Yeah.
Connie Newsom, Mary
Yes.
herself,
Yes.
every day fighting to keep it going.
Yeah.
And
And Tawny's amazing as well. Fun little story. I was waiting in line to see Jonathan Frakes just to say hi. I was getting my poster actually signed, and this was just after the crossover with Lower Decks and Strange New Worlds. Well, I'm literally like this close to Tawny, okay? She walks up just to say hi. Gates was like 2 or 3 tables over, sees Tawny, runs over, and she's like, no, she's my friend. And Jonathan's like, no. They're like fighting over her, and I'm just watching this. I'm like, this is why I love Star Trek. Because even the actors are so close, and it's so amazing to see. So, yeah. But again, thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. Head over to the North Expo if you want to check out my booth. And yeah, that's it, guys. Have a wonderful Saturday.
Don't forget, you can listen to all the audio versions of Crusher Combo on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Good Pods, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can support the podcast by buying merch on TeePublic, buy me a coffee by scanning that QR code, or becoming a Patreon member for as low as $3 a month. But the best way to support Crusher Combo is to like and subscribe here on YouTube. You can also find me on Blue Sky, Instagram, Threads, or TikTok, so please follow me there. And of course, all this information can be found on CrusherConvo.com.
Crusher out.